Thank you very much. Well, members of the press, you would have made two statements, one yesterday and one today, so that we can use that as a benchmark, point of departure for any questions that you might have. Except to amplify briefly that as a group of nations in the Caribbean, it's my opinion that our collective rates of growth are just not good enough in terms of global standards. And I believe that we have to work diligently and using the support of multilateral institutions, not the least of which is the Caribbean Development Bank. We have to rely on the CDB to assist us in the most focused, the most targeted way to improve productivity levels, to improve competitiveness, and as I said yesterday, to diversify our investments, not to get complacent because oil prices are at a relatively low level, not to get complacent that now is in fact the time for us to accelerate energy diversification into renewables. And of course, in everything, we need more and more technology. So I look forward to working with the Caribbean Development Bank, and once again, congratulate Dr. Smith on his re-election as president.
Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Smith?
Thank you very much, Minister Shaw. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, I think we have had a very good week of meetings with our governors, that is our shareholders, and also with our board of directors. We have also taken the opportunity in several side meetings to have more detailed discussions around the business of the bank and to identify opportunities for assistance to our countries. Jamaica is the largest shareholder of the Caribbean Development Bank, along with Trinidad and Tobago. And our assistance to Jamaica over the years has been substantial for an institution of our size. Jamaica has been the largest borrower, the largest beneficiary of our resources for a very long time. We continue to support the work of the government and people of Jamaica as they seek to address the challenges that face this country. The general theme of this meeting was economic growth. And as we understand it, that is the primary objective of the new government of this country. So we are on the same wavelength. I think that during the course of this meeting, what we talked about was the type of growth that we think that Jamaica and our other borrowing member countries need. And that is growth which is aggressive growth, but it must be resilient growth and inclusive growth. The resilient growth speaks to resilience not only to external economic shocks and natural disasters, but growth that is built on a platform of good financial management, good public financial management, and also an aggressive approach to reducing the indebtedness of this country. So that's the agenda that we support. And my information certainly is that that accords with the objectives of the government of this country. So I think that we are in a good place. What we want to do now is to sit down and have a more granular discussion around the ways in which we can be helpful to Jamaica achieving its objectives. And that is the business that we're going to address very shortly. We have already started discussions around these themes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Smith. All right, colleagues from the media, if you have questions, we have 8 minutes. The floor is open. Just press the button on the mic before you and turn it off once you've finished asking the question, please.
Dr. Smith, you said that growth was the theme of the meeting, and in your remarks at the opening of the conference, you did indicate that for the Caribbean to try to eliminate abject poverty by the end of the next decade, we would have to grow at between 5 to 7% annually. You also gave the statistics to quote from in the 1970s, when we were growing at an annual rate of 3.9%, in the 90s, 1.9%, since 2008, hovering at just over 1%. What radical policies are needed to bring about the transformation of Caribbean economies to get them back to to get them to a growth rate above the 70s, and certainly to push them into an impetus from developing to developed countries?
Thanks for the question. I think that in his opening remarks yesterday, the Prime Minister of Jamaica made a very, very important point. He spoke to the need to achieve accelerated growth by private sector development and less reliance on debt accumulation. What that means in effect is that you need to create the incentives, you need to create the environment within which the private sector will invest. So that is part of the responsibility of government. A lot of work has already been done in that area, to the extent that Jamaica ranks #1 in the Caribbean on the Doing Business Index. But that #1 places us at a ranking of 64. Let us not minimize or diminish the importance of having reached 64. But 64 is not good enough. We need to also move further up that index so that the right signals can be sent to the private sector. Part of that doing business environment is a stable macroeconomic environment, and that is the overall responsibility of the Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry of Finance understands their job in that regard very well. So that, and they're working with the multilateral institutions, not only the IMF, but also ourselves, the World Bank, and the IDB. So that if that environment is created on a sustainable basis and other structural issues are addressed, such as what Minister Shaw just mentioned, addressing the issues of green energy, that will be one of the factors which will help to put Jamaica on a much more aggressive and sustainable path. So we need to continue the investments in renewable energy. But those investments, a lot of the financing is going to come from the private sector. So you also need to create that regulatory environment, build on what already has been done, but build it in such a way that you get even more rapid investment in that sector. The final point that I would like to make, well, two more points. As I said in my statement yesterday, we need to address the structure of our economy. We are trading on too narrow a group of economic sectors. And even those sectors that we have, they're not sufficiently integrated across the country. So that we need to fix that structure. We also need to make our country more resilient. We live in a hostile environment. Even though we live in paradise, there is hostility around us in respect of environmental hazards. So that one of the responsibilities also of the government, and it's directly related to growth, is to make those investments in resilient infrastructure. And the good news is that this is happening at a time when very attractively priced resources are now becoming available to finance climate proofing of infrastructure. Those resources are also becoming available, which enable you to invest in renewable energy at attractive prices, And the Caribbean Development Bank is very much involved in those two aspects of resilience building in the region. So if you do all of those things, we are confident that you're going to see a surge in investment, not only domestic, but also international. I made reference this morning to, we're already seeing signs of considerable domestic investment taking place. I read my newspapers very, very carefully, so I know what you journalists are reporting. And what I see is an upsurge in domestic investment. A lot of Jamaican firms are now investing in their own country. But I'm also seeing projects that have already taken place in tourism right here in beautiful Montego Bay, and there are more to come. And as we continue to do the right things, that confidence builds, and confidence is a wonderful thing. It tends to become infectious, and that infection leads to more and more development and more growth. So that is, it's not a simple formula, it's multifaceted, but what we do know from the experience of others is that it works. So that Jamaica needs to just continue to do the right things. I think the emphasis of the government on the human factor is also good. I think that the appointment of the growth czar, if I can use that term to describe Mr. Leachin, I think it's a good initiative, and we're supportive of it. Thank you.
And I'd like to add in context, because your question was pretty general as to how we plan to achieve this growth. And I think that in our context, at a policy level, we have emphasized that we fully recognize that we just can't go on like this. Because in Jamaica's case, we've been literally drifting at a 1% per year average growth for the past 25 years. This is unacceptable. And so, not only in the campaign, but importantly, in terms of the policy initiatives that have been implemented, the Prime Minister has established a Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation that is right there in his office at Jamaica House. And we brought in a lot of the growth inducing ministries and departments. We have amalgamated them together so that it will help us to, for instance, the approvals process that has traditionally bedeviled the system of just getting things approved, getting projects moving. I'm already detecting that a lot of the obstacles are being systematically removed so that we can speed up the approvals process. That's taking place as we speak. And I think broadly, we need to emphasize something here. This is a point of departure where oil prices are relatively low, very low in the context of the recent history. When I was minister last time during the worst global economic crisis in 80 years, we had oil prices at $140 per barrel, US. Today we are talking about $40. So you see the significant difference there. So oil prices are low. Interest rates have been trending down after I left it at single digits in 2011. They are now lower certainly in terms of mortgage rates and so on. The inflation rate is on the outturn for the fiscal year is 3%. Last time we've seen that in low inflation rate was in 1967. So you get an idea of how important that is. And of course, we have seen, using the Petrocarib debt buyback, we have seen a 10% drop in our debt to GDP ratio, now hovering at about 124% of gross domestic product. So, and as the President has noted, the improvement in the doing business report, all of these factors combined, we have to ask the question, if we cannot make a purposeful dent in the challenge of economic growth now, then when are we going to do it? And that is the challenge that this government is now focused, very, very focused on accomplishing that growth, that job creation, and that wealth creation that we all yearn and desire.
Thank you so very much. We have time only for one very quick question. Okay, Naki Mendoza, go ahead.
Naki Mendoza, DevX. Regarding energy diversification and competitiveness vis-a-vis energy inputs.
I'm sorry, would you just speak up, please? Thanks.
Can you hear me? Better? Yeah, given the rapidly deteriorating conditions in Venezuela, how prepared is Jamaica and the broader Caribbean for what could be a substantial and severe and sudden revision of financing terms under Petrocaribe? And how is the bank preparing for that?
Well, I think that I don't want to speak, I cannot speak on behalf of Venezuela. I don't know what would portend. I don't know what, I'm not here to either predict what the outcomes are going to be in relation to the Venezuelan economy. I know that they're going through a very, very serious crisis. But as far as the Petrocaribe facility is concerned, the Venezuelan government has consistently said that the facility is important to them. It's there to stay. I know that assistance to Jamaica and to the Caribbean from Venezuela on oil-related matters didn't begin with Petrocaribe. Petrocaribe was a deepening and enhancement of the assistance to the Caribbean from Venezuela and to some extent also Mexico at an earlier point in time. So that oil diplomacy has been part of the relationship between Venezuela and the Caribbean for a very long time, with successive governments. So what I believe is within the control of the government of Jamaica is to pursue vigorously energy efficiency reforms, because energy efficiency provides the greatest return on investment when you're talking about energy. Greatest return on investment. Pursue those vigorously. Pursue vigorously the adoption and implementation of renewable energy projects and reduce the fossil fuel footprint here in Jamaica as rapidly as you possibly can. I think that the decision to make a conversion to natural gas, LNG, as an intermediary fuel, so to speak, was a good and timely one, because what it does is it not only reduces the price of the cost of electricity, but it gives you much greater stability, because the pricing of it tends to be more stable than the other fossil fuels. So that is supposed to start kicking in sometime this year, and I think it's 2018 is when the big shift takes place in relation to baseload generation. That will provide much less dependence on other facilities, concessionary facilities.
In fact, let me add up some more details that can give you the trajectory. By August of this year, the BOG facility right here in Western Jamaica will be converting to 120 megawatts of liquid natural gas fired power. That's in a couple of months' time, literally. And then there's a 190 megawatt LNG plant that will be at the Old Harbor. And that's the one that will roll out in 2018 or thereabout. And I want to indicate to you as well the seriousness of the government's approach to, and this includes the previous government and this government, that as we speak, we are in the midst of rolling out over 100 megawatts of wind energy and solar energy. The exact figure as to how much more than 100 megawatts, I can't give you at this stage, but it's over 100 megawatts because you have two wind power companies. You have Wigton and you have the new one, BMR, that are both operating in the St. Elizabeth, South Manchester area. The Monroe area of St. Elizabeth and the South Manchester area of Manchester. And then, of course, you have a solar-powered plant that is also being implemented. So well over 100 megawatts of renewable energy within the context right now of the present use of under 700 megawatts in the total grid. That should give you an indication of the seriousness of the move that we're making, both in respect of renewables and in respect of getting to a cleaner energy via the liquid natural gas.
Thank you so very much, Minister.